The bottom line is we want our troops to know that the majority of members in Congress, in both the House and Senate, are actually on your side, and we're going to be fighting like hell to make sure that we take care of you. This isn't a partisan issue, and this certainly isn't a political issue, at least it shouldn't be, and that's the point. We need to take care of our troops regardless of our personal political agendas, and at this point in our nation's history, we need a win for our troops. On the heels of the Afghanistan debacle and in the midst of some of the worst recruiting and retention metrics that our nation has seen in recent history, House Republicans are literally the only people standing between our troops and this extremely weak executive branch that seems hell-bent on driving military readiness, morale, and capacity into the ground. Today, to give you an example, the Army and the Navy are both missing their recruiting numbers by about 25%. 25% below their targets, and that's after they've already lowered their expectations. So this proposed Republican defense bill that we address today is actually the first DoD package in several years that actually reverses that trajectory of decline of our military and the decline of our nation's standing on the global stage. With this bill, we finally start to appropriate and appropriately invest in our troops, invest in industrial production capacity, and we ensure that we're spending money on matters that actually go towards funding the mission of the military and not issues and pet projects that actually dilute the mission of the military. I want to talk about a very important part of this bill that I personally was vested in. And we buy all the submarines and the F-35s and the ships and the bullets that we need to buy, but the most important weapon is our troops. And in this bill, we take the starting salary from $22,000 a year for an E1. It's hard to believe, but that's what an E1, when you first join the military, you're making $22,000 a year, which is the equivalent of $11 per hour, which is about half of what a fast food worker makes in California right now. I rewrote the pay table so that they start at $31,200, which is the equivalent of $15 an hour. And this would be the biggest pay raise that we have given our junior enlisted troops. By the way, this doesn't ripple all the way up through the officer ranks. This is contained in the E1 through E6 ranks, but it represents a 35 to 40% increase at each one of those pay grades, which is absolutely necessary right now given where our troops are. About a third of our troops live below the poverty line. About a third of our troops qualify for food stamps. So if we're going to pay them in the form of food stamps, we might as well pivot that money to pay them in the form of base salary. I find it offensive and egregious that the president, Joe Biden, sent a veto letter out a few days ago where he cites this pay raise for our junior enlisted troops as one of the reasons that he's vetoing the DoD House Republican bill. I don't understand the logic of that. I don't know where Secretary of Defense Austin is, but if he's not talking to the president about this, he needs to be right now.
The U.S. military is not a petri dish of experimentation for social change. Our military must focus on near-term threats, delivery of capability, and taking care of our service members. Any policy that jeopardizes readiness, was divisive to our troops, and undermine the unit cohesion, or compromise the safety of our troops was removed in this bill. Right now, we need to focus on avoiding a government shutdown, which would be devastating to our military. A shutdown would put our military on a back foot against China, exactly the wrong moment. Critical procurements, including the Columbia and Virginia-class submarines, conventional prompt strike, the national security space launch would be prohibited. Necessary investments in programs like the B-21 and in the weapons industrial base, including the Trident, the Tomahawk, the Standard Missile, LASM, AMRAAM, would not occur. Small businesses will be severely impacted as orders and payments are delayed, stifling future innovation. The largest enterprise in the world would grind to a halt. The overwhelming majority of the department's civilian workforce would be furloughed in a shutdown, shutting down critical functions. Military readiness will be degraded as all exercises and training, live and virtual, will be deferred or canceled. Professional military education, proficiency, and qualification training will be canceled. Furthermore, maintenance and repairs to hardware and infrastructure would not be permitted, further delaying restoration of readiness levels following a shutdown. Our service members and their families are the ones who would bear the brunt of a shutdown. They would not get paid during the shutdown, but would be required to report to their duty station regardless. While at work, they will not be able to train, as I previously discussed, and at the same time, their access to essential family services, such as child care, medical appointments, and youth programs, would be severely limited. This is an untenable situation for our service members and their families.
Just going to cut to the chase. The world is a much more dangerous place under the Biden administration. We have an ascendant China. We're closer to World War than we have been, since what, 1962? Since the Cuban Missile Crisis. We need to make sure that we understand that our troops are not bargaining chips. They're not poker chips. These are real human beings that every day right now, as we're having this press conference, are out there protecting our lives. Those are ours and those are yours. And those are your children and they're my grandchildren. So we cannot use our troops as bargaining chips. We're all trying to get to the same place. We want fiscal responsibility. We want all of these things, reduce government spending. We want these things, but we got to do it responsibly. And this is not the way to do it.
If leadership in the United States fails, we will invite aggression. Deterrence is cheaper than war. No one is doing this better than our submarine sailors with respect to all the fine people who serve. We can't fumble at this critical juncture. We can't fumble in our construction of the platforms that we need to deter war, and we can't stumble in support of the people that we have out serving.